जोर जालिम शासनवा हम जान गईली, चले उल्टा भी धनवा हम जान गईली। जोर जालिम शासनवा हम जान गईली, चले उल्टा भी धनवा हम जान गईली। बेछली में बाह कटर पिपरा में तनवा हम जान गईली। बेछली में बाह कटल पिपरा में तनवा हम जान गईली। नहीं आदमी हरिजनवा हम जान गईली, नहीं आदमी हरिजनवा हम जान गईली। जोर जालिम शासनवा हम जान गईली, चले उल्टा भी धनवा हम जान गईली। बाबू के बुटवा तेरे भाई के मनवा हम जान गईली। बाबू के बुटवा तेरे भाई के मनवा हम जान गईली। बाबू के बुटवा तेरे भाई के मनवा हम जान गईली। बाबू के बुटवा तेरे माई के मनवा हम जान गईली। बाबू के बुटवा तेरे बहिना के मनवा हम जान गईली। दबे चरने चरणवा हम जान गईली, दबे चरने चरणवा हम जान गईली। चले उल्टा भी धनवा हम जान गईली। जोर जालिम शासनवा हम जान गईली, चले उल्टा भी धनवा हम जान गईली। बेछल में बाह कटल पिपरा में तनवा हम जान गईली। जोर जालिम शासनवा हम जान गईली।
छोरो छोरो मेघ बाहारे ভিতরে, छोरो छोरो आखि पानी ভিতর बाहर एकाकार मुझे पानी हुआ सोर रानी। ए पानी रे केते गारो केते धारो किए ता पारिछि जानी। ভিতর बाहर एकाकार मुझे पानी हुआ सोर रानी। किए बसेला कागज नौका, किए बाहिला बोईत, किए बसेला कागज नौका, किए बाहिला बोईत। किए थळकुळ हराई बुडिला खोजिबाकु मन भीत। किए गोटेइला सामुका किए बा निज सब नेला छाणी। ভিতর बाहर एकाकार मुझे पानी हुआ सोर रानी। अंजलि रे कलसी रे केबे बा सरित रे सागर रे। अंजलि रे कलसी रे केबे बा सरित रे सागर रे। भरानी रे मोर अभिषेक हुए केते बोते बारे बारे। मुकुटटी थाळ परी दिसुथाए, मुकुटटी थाळ परी दिसुथाए। रानी चिर भिकारुणी ভিতর बाहर एकाकार मुझे पानी हुआ सोर रानी। मुकुटमणि रे सबुरी सरधा, किए साइतिब पानी। ମୁକୁଟମଣିରେ ସବୁରି ଶରଧା କିଏ ସାଇତିବ ପାଣି ଶ୍ୱାସ ସରିଗଲେ ପାଣିର ଏ ରାଜଧାନୀ ପାଲଟେ ମଶାଣି ଶ୍ୱାସ ସରିଗଲେ ପାଣିର ଏ ରାଜଧାନୀ ପାଲଟେ ମଶାଣି କୁହ ତ କାହିଁକି ପାଣି ସୁଅ ଏତେ କୁହ ତ କାହିଁକି ପାଣି ସୁଅ ଏତେ ମୋ ଲାଗି ବହେ ଉଜାଣି ଭିତର ବାହାର ଏକାକାର ମୁଁ ଯେ ପାଣି ଉଆସର ରାଣୀ ଝର ଝର ମେଘ ବାହାରେ ଭିତରେ ଝର ଝର ଆଖି ପାଣି ଭିତର ବାହାର ଏକାକାର ମୁଁ ଯେ ପାଣି ଉଆସର ରାଣୀ।
Now we will have reflections on the conference, on the festival. So let me ask our French poet friend Guilhem Faber to begin his reflections, reflections on poetry and his suggestions for what we should do next. We will start with
About poetry, I just wanted to deepen what I said yesterday because this morning we had a few sessions and this afternoon we could see what we can advance in this direction. I said that according to my vision, poetry is the wand which is nearest from the sun. That is, it means I would also use another verse that I've translated from the Chinese poet Liu Hongbing, which say, I am the sail which transfer suffering into movement. And I think that this verse applies to poetry. And we have seen this morning that you see, there is a dynamic which is produced by poetry and which allows us just to speak about ourselves in a deep way and in the same time to advance.
one second. So that was a very important quote from Liu Hongbing.
我是 in Chinese 我是收取我是用痛苦收取动力的饭
ମୁଁ ହଉଛି ନୌକାର ପାଲ ଯିଏ ଯନ୍ତ୍ରଣାକୁ ଆନ୍ଦୋଳନରେ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ କରେ
我是用痛苦收取动力的饭 in Chinese. So it's a kind of movement, you see, and this movement is made of course, produces resistance to the actual condition. I think that poetry is made of imagination, but in the same time, it's a very realistic approach to reality, because in all ways we live, we don't just we live. We have joys and sorrows, of course, but joys and sorrows fixed in the minds, are fixed in our minds, and poetry allows us just to express these things, so through words. And words create reality. I mean, reality is not something which is independent from our language. Words produce reality. And especially, and then I would add something which is about poetry. You see, I would use poetry is absolutely useless, we can say. Of course, like water, or but it's essential. And I would use, you see, the parable by the philosopher Zhuangzi in the 4th century before Christ. He spoke about a big tree, you see, saying, and it's a very famous chapter in Zhuangzi, who is a famous theorist of Taoism. He said, the use of the useless. And he speaks of a tree which cannot be cut by the carpenter the carpenter has let this tree, but it's absolute because it's too big, you see, so it's useless. But in a way, this usefulness is full of use, because people can have shadows, birds can sing in the tree, on the tree, etc. So it creates life. And what is absolutely useless and absolutely essential in this life is poetry, love, harmony, you see, and I think and energy. And when we connect with energy, it's a way also to connect with energy and to maybe to have access in a way to what we can say ecstasy, to a superior state of joy. In the sense that, as the philosopher Spinoza used to say, joy, according to Spinoza, you see in the 17th century Holland, he said joy is a way, he defined joy as a kind of extending the surface, extending the being, the existence, the feeling of extension of existence. And it can be also a feeling of extensions of time, you see. When we listen to poetry or when we create poetry, like in music, you see, you have this kind of joy or see this extension that we have access to another way to communicate with, you see, all the forces of being. So, and so it's these are a few reflections about poetry. Of course, I would add maybe a few ones when I have got a lot more to say, but I don't want to be to be longer.
Do you have some suggestions about the conference, about the festival?
Well, I think that your definition, of course, in the same time puts the question, because you spoke of a festival and a conference, and I think it's, you see, this is in the same time a conference and a festival, you see, but I would say that the conference aspect is very interesting, because I think a lot of people could meet, could exchange, and could advance in their creative works and share, you see, their love of poetry, but not only share it, but also could advance in their creative, way of thinking, etc. And what they are doing about, you see, and in the same time, you see, I think I just think as a foreigner, you see, I've not been here for the first time in Orissa, but I guess the people who come from far away and who make a long trip to Orissa, what would be good for them would be to organize something which would be, you see, where you could concile the two aspects. I mean, that you could discuss, maybe some discussion has to be made in Odisha. In language, you see, just not necessarily translated, because people coming from far away, they don't have necessarily the actual intelligence of India to understand what it's all about. They don't know so much the caste system, they don't know, and so, except Indianists, if you, of course, invite Indianists that would be specialists of India, or they would be very interested by this kind of discussion. But poets coming from outside, they just want to exchange on creative matters, maybe, and just to read. So I would suggest that most of the reading could be made at Konark Temple during the evening when it's closed, or at this hour, when there are less and less people you see coming up, beginning at 6 o'clock maybe, ending at 9. I mean, most of the creative readings, and some aspects also, some exchange could be made. Each poet would present his, well, the way that, what led him to poetry, what is his conception of poetry, and speak a little about his own creation, and then just read a few poems. Or I don't know exactly that you organizers will have to define exactly the timing, etc. But I would suggest also that people coming from foreign countries would have, at least when they come from far away, you see, look at 2 days just to visit all around Odisha, and concile maybe they would come one day before, etc. So, and they could, and most, because when you come from far away, I guess most of the people either are in one room, you see, and intensive exchange, you see, they would be quite tired, you see. Tired, I mean, because they just want to see outside, they don't know anything. So they have come from far away, they want to meet people, but also to know in beautiful places, and you are just close by one of the most beautiful temples of the world. So it's yes, it would be a way really to make a real festival. I mean, not only because I think that we made more a conference than a festival. You see what I mean? Huh? There is a kind of hesitation between the two formulas, but I think the festival would be, well, something open outside, you see, most of the time. In the Konark or elsewhere, in other places that you could, that is just
Congratulate the organizers for exposing to this beautiful, what is considered to be celebrating poetry, because coming over here, as I told you this morning also, that I could discover many poets. Meaning Ashutosh Parida is one. I have read some of his poems but never met, and Aparna and Priti, meaning several, you know that, and the person who picked up us from the airport himself is a poet, Karthik. So number one, coming over here is, you know, it is quite a discovery, though I belong to Odisha, but it was really discovery for me, and I'm really happy that the poetry is not just limited to poetry alone, but also activism. Some of, you know, that the spirit that came along with poetry recitation. So I have two quick suggestions which were raised by both the speakers to solve it. I thought, meaning it is up to the organizer actually, you know that, and this is the first. So that's why, you know, that the direction that, meaning which way it will go, I don't know, but let's combine both conference and festival format. What I felt that because this is for the first time we organize, I'm part of that, so that's I'm telling we. See, you know that if there are 2 days meaning 2 days festival, then let's choose 4 maybe prominent poets Like we decided earlier that one could be Jan Mahapatra, Shailaj Ravi, Brajanath Rath and Vasudev Sunani. But to inaugurate, we also like people like Sachidanand. So I have a solution to the problem that were raised by two speakers. One, we have 4 sessions, and centering around the poet, let there be a theme, maybe theme meaning whatever, suppose, it depends on who the poets are, because there are ample of poets actually, and it can go for years to come. But if there is no dearth of poets in Odisha. So one is, that for inaugural we need to, begin with like a, inaugural address or critical note on the idea of poetry, because we also need to review poetry. Meaning, as an academy, I would be happy if someone is reviewing poetry yearly. It could be anything, Indian literature format or something, so it could be overall, that perspective on Indian poetry or Oriya poetry or maybe Hindi poetry. So it depends on the area that we choose, but there should be one inaugural at least paper, and centering around, say, if we are choosing 4 poets, say we are choosing 4 poets every festival, then I thought that this time we accommodated too many poets. Sometime just, that please come and read, and sometime of course time was short and kind of thing. So what we can do is, some of the, meaning the last is very interesting, which we finally stop the open session, where we can invite young budding poets of different kinds. There should be one open, but we have to screen also, meaning there should be some selection. It is not that, anyone who comes, meaning we have to have time limit and kind of thing. But centering around 4 poets, I think at least 2 poets of the same kind. So one inaugural, meaning I'm not just talking about the first one, but for every poet there should be one paper, critical paper, on one aspect of it. It could be anything, theme, structure, style, language, issues relating to. So at least one critical and 2 poets should read along with the poet that we have chosen for. Say, Brajanath Rath. Vijay Babu read a paper that was very nice, because it took us to not only his activism, also the poetic world, and then, as you finally concluded, humanity. So if we have a paper for each session of that kind, then it will perhaps take care of the overall perspective of that poet, because we are exposing, we are choosing, and then 2 poets, like today for Vasudev Sunani we had one extra, but then that we can have 2. So that Vasudev Sunani can read his paper, and along with that maybe another 2, but 2 poems actually. The chairperson has to be very careful about planning time and finishing. So I think that the format should be, what I am suggesting is, it is understood that let's have 3 days, 4 sessions, 4 poets, and there should be one open session where we would also have later reflection about what went wrong, right, so that we can, so this is my sincere, yeah.
2 reflections that have come, they don't seem to be matching, all right? So if this festival is going to be an international festival, which we are planning to make it into an international festival, then I think the suggestion that Rajkumar has made will not work. They have a very different conception of what is a poetry festival. It is packed with poetry, packed with recreation, meeting, music, traveling. These are the things that actually happen in festivals, all right? But given that it's a certain group of people we are a certain kind of people. We are very much connected with social movements, connected with conceptually, if you want to understand, social realism, for example. So our approach will differ a bit, because in our festivals, it just cannot be festivity. It's not festivity which will inform our festival. There certainly will be serious reflection on poetry. So part of Rajkumar's suggestion can be taken, maybe 1/4, and then it can work if we want to make it international. That is to say, we will certainly have a serious serious inaugural note, which will set the agenda for that particular festival wherever it takes place. And then there should be an exhaustive evaluation or reflection on world situation in which what role poetry is playing, what role it should play, what is happening in the name of poetry, what are the trends of poetry world over. That should come. So we can't fix 4 poets or something like that. We should go for a very approach at the level of the planet, because this is how we have conceptualized ourselves. So suppose there is something going on in the name of poetry in China, then that should become a big concern for us. Or something is happening in Europe. So what I mean to say is that we will not, as organizers, we are not going to behave as if we are just Indians, or we are Oriya, or we are Marathi, or this and that. We will have an international perspective, and whatever is demanded by that perspective, theoretical, conceptual, or in terms of patterns as to how internationally poets are relating to each other, all of that should become part of how we are going to organize. That's my view.
It's not suggestion regarding the format and all that, but then if we are going to internationalize, then I'm really from the very beginning associated with Chandrabhaga, and perhaps it's Jayanta Mahapatra for the first time. He was not known to me. He translated my poetry and it appeared in Indian literature. So what I would like to suggest, if at all we are going to internationalize, then there should be, at least we should find out a group of people who can really translate some of the poetries and some of the writings, so that people will not come into dilemma whether I do have, supposing I am being chosen by the committee member that I will be presenting my paper, or poetry, but I don't have my translation. And the Odisha situation is such that I cannot request somebody to translate my poetry. It is kind of a begging. The situation is kind of a begging the things, what I have seen. So I don't actually personally, I don't like to request anybody to translate my poetry and such kind of thing. So if at all we can form a group of a group of people, a team of translators, so that they will do some homework and come and present the thing. And for kind information, today, till today, though I have written, this is not my anguish, rather it's an information. That is Sanskrit, Cultural History of Dalit. It was published in 2009, and no Oriya educationist, poet, essayist, even anybody, they have not written a single word till now. But yeah, exactly. And also, you had, sir, given an instruction to someone, I would not like to request his name, in Delhi, you have categorically told someone to have an article on this book. When I had been to Delhi CSD, you have categorically told someone. What I would like to say, if at all, the interface, the poetry interface, it should be projected to the international audience, then there should be a good translation, and beforehand that should be done. Thank you so much.
Okay, now Vijay.
I do not want to speak much now because everything depends upon what is our purpose, that is what is our objective, which is still not set properly. And second is the organization aspect. Actually this time the organization actually we have called this meeting with our individual ties with other writers. So it is always better that there is some organization, and unless the writers themselves are the members of the organization, why should they keep the request of an individual poet? If they are part of the organization, then they will say that yes, they have some duty. But just on personal request, why should they come? So we should think of this aspect, and actually we should try to, those who are organizing it at least, their objective to be very clear. I want that the objective should be very clear. Aso is there, Sunani is there, and Mahanti is there, and our friend who has sponsored it, Mr. Chandrabhaga Poetry is there. If we can sit in a separate session and decide all these things, I think things can proceed. And we have got the addresses and other things of the writers, and we can also extend it. And if something of this sort, and we have to thinking, I think this is, here we cannot finalize things. We can just give our thinkings, but here things cannot be completed perhaps.
I think that in spite of everything that's just been said, I think that we've made a beginning and a good one at that. And I think it is, it ought to be applauded. One of the things that has been said over and over again, I think, is how to make a festival more festive. Something that right from the beginning we were thinking about it and so on and so forth, but something that I just wanted to know, whenever we do anything in this country, we make a festival out of it. When we want to make a festival, it is never happens. You know, so what we need to do is possibly not say that we are making a festival and it will become a festival. And I think that's the way to go about it, actually. I am being very serious about this. I think we should simply say that we would like poets and like-minded people to come and celebrate imagination, celebrate poetry, and have fun. And it will turn into a festival organically. And that's how I think a festival is made festive. Okay. I also think that we need to very seriously think about how far we want to make this grow. Because yes, as much as possible. That might require, and that might actually sort of become contrary to what we wanted in the first place. Okay, so we will have to sit back and see how far we want to take this. Because after a point, once it becomes big, it goes out of your hand, it becomes corporate. And otherwise you can't run it. And if it becomes corporate, it might actually go contrary to what we started off wanting to do. So it's a kind of a catch-22 situation here. So we really need to think very carefully how far we want to go with this. Secondly, I also think that we need to consider the actual place. Because when we say Chandrabhaga, do we actually want it to be in Chandrabhaga all the time? Because this is fine. But beyond this, it's going to become a logistic nightmare to have things here, bigger than this. Okay? So we need to figure out if we simply run with the title and not the actual place? Or do we want to stay with the space? Then we have to figure out how to go about doing it. The third thing is doing stuff in Konarka. Now, doing stuff in Konarka is close to impossible. A, because it's under Archaeological Survey of India, and B, now it is not even under Archaeological Survey of India, it is under UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. So to get permission to go and do anything in there would be a nightmare. Okay, only the government can do it. Because when they do their festivals, actually they are flouting all the rules. Okay? If UNESCO knew that government was doing what they are doing, they would take away that status. They are not supposed to do anything within a certain radius of that. But they are doing it. They have got shops there, which is completely illegal. Okay? So, I don't think we want to add to the illegality. Okay? So we have to think in terms of all of these things. I think creating a festival to my mind, would be wonderful. I think we should do it, and we should do it in a bigger way. And I think that a combination of the academe and the sort of leap of imagination should be there. But how, in realistic terms, we're going to achieve that is something that we'll have to sit down and talk about. Thank you. But I really do wish to thank all of you for having come here and made this event successful. As far as I'm concerned, it has been extremely successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. First of all, I thank Chandrabhaga Poetry and through him, his Institute of Global Knowledge and the Centurion University of Technology and Management, who accepted the idea, took over the entire logistics, and Ambika and his team, who has been really looking after all of us, have done a tremendous job. We really thank you. And the video team, special thanks. We are going to have a video of the entire proceedings, and it will be on the website of CUTM.ac.edu.
We'll send you the link as soon as this is ready.
Great. And we will also try to have a publication, a print publication with the papers and the poems. Therefore, those of you who have not given us copies of your poems, please give them. Either to him, Ambika, that is the Global Knowledge Institute, or to me or Vijay Upadhyay. There are three important issues. One is organization, the other is the dimension, the local, global dimension, and third, the place. It will always be through friends. Vijay, you and I are part of how many organizations together? Even if we are members of separate organizations, we work together for the last 30, 40 years. That's how we have worked. It was Vijay who got all of you together. I got some, she got some, and so on. And that's how it will work. We have, you can see in small letters, Chandrabhaga Poetry Festival Committee. Okay, so the committee consists of, so far 4 or 5 members in the print probably, and Vijay Upadhyay is the inevitable other member. And they will decide from time to time who else should be in the committee. Sorry? Yeah.
Actually, all people can send their papers and their poems to our email ID created for Chandrabhaga Poetry Festival. It is chandrabhagafest@gmail.com.
Okay. Please everybody know that. chandrabhagafest@gmail.com. Please send your poems and papers.
And the password is also with you. I have said you. I will send
You want everybody to know the password?
No, I will say it.
Okay.
So that you can access.
Okay, yeah. Therefore, I do not think we can set up any formal organization. What we have done, you may have noticed, while you registered, on the top it is written membership fee. We are now all members of this festival. And that obliges us to communicate with each other, and we have created, Ambika has very kindly said he will prepare the list and share it with all of us. So we are all connected as the festival group, okay? Therefore, on the organization, we will consult each other. And certain things I may say, you may not agree, and I will not do anything that you don't agree. Or Chandrabhanu doesn't agree, or she doesn't agree. We will only work on the consensus. Sometimes I have to give up some of my ideas, sometimes you have to. That's how every collective in any democratic organization has to work. That's an organization.